bottom della città largo. Presto bottega che
Italy, my country, the country of hand gestures, pasta, tourism, the one country that everyone and their mother knows something about. Just kidding. No one knows anything about Italy. In 1847, Austrian diplomat Clemens von Metternich said the following about a pre-unification Italy. Italy is nothing but a geographical term. But what did he mean with just a geographical term? We will explore this matter across 3 videos that I will release in the following days. The first one on how and why is Italy divided. The second one on the cultural and linguistical divisions of Italy. And in the last one, I will have some fun debunking some of the most common stereotypes and misconceptions regarding Italians. So today's video is all about how and why is Italy divided. In order to understand how and in what way Italians are divided, we have to start from Italy itself, its map, and see what were the ancient people that used to inhabit the peninsula before the Roman conquest. Let's start from the south and let's start with the Greeks. These guys were everywhere in the Mediterranean and Italy was no exception. Not only Italy was no exception, Italy was so heavily colonized by the Greeks that the Romans used to call it Great Greece, Magna Graecia. The influence they had on the surrounding Italic people, including the Roman, is huge, from language to culture to religion. These guys were the Iapygians or Apulians, how the Romans used to call it, and from which the name of the region Apulia comes from in the area. They were Illyrian people originally, meaning they came from the Balkans, not Slavs. The Slavs came way later than that. But they were of Illyrian origins, and they were some of the most heavily Hellenized pre-Roman people of Italy, to the point that in the area, Greek is still spoken to this day. We meet now the first Italic people, the Oscan people, Oscan being the name of their language and sort of the name of their group. Most famously, the Samnites and the Lucanians were Oscan people, and they used to live the biggest chunk of the southern part of the main Italian peninsula. Being Italic means that they were linguistically and ethnically, to a point, related to the other Italic people of the peninsula, including the Romans, with whom they were at war for the most part of their existence. In Sicily, surrounded by Greek and Carthaginian cities, lived 3 groups of people: the Sicels, the Sicanians, and the Elymians. They were a mix of Italic and pre-Italic people, but for the sake of this video, we'll just refer to them as the non-Greek inhabitants of Sicily. In Sardinia, something similar to what happened in Sicily was happening with Carthaginian cities, who basically surrounded the internal mountains and territory of the islands that were inhabited by the Sardinian people, who were descendants of Neolithic farmers who moved into the island way before any other Italic people moved in, making them some of the most ancient people in all of Italy and Europe for that matter. This little red area here was inhabited by another Italic group of people named the Latins, to which the Romans belong. And you might be surprised to find out that no, Roman doesn't equal Italian, never did. Quite the contrary, the group of Italic people to which the Romans belonged, the Latin, were one of the smallest in Italy. Then we have the Umbrians. Now the Umbrians belonged with the Oscan people that we saw earlier in a single language group called Osco-Umbrian, but they were separate people. The Umbrians surrounded the Romans, and they were the Italic people with whom the Roman had the most interaction at the beginning of their expansion quest. Also, they were some of the first to be absorbed and invited into the new Roman state. Now, these big purple boys here are the Etruscans. Now, we've all heard of the Etruscans, who inhabit largely what's today the region of Tuscany, that takes the name from the Etruscans and the name that the Romans gave to the region. They were a non-Italic, non-Indo-European people who came probably from the north and were influential, massively influential, into the formation and development of the Roman state. Now let's do a little jump and let's go up northeast where we meet the Veneti. Now, obviously, if you've heard the name Veneti, the first thing you think about is Venice. You'd be right. The name of the city and the name of the current Italian region of Veneto comes from them. They were an Italic people, but they were heavily Celticized, which that means influenced by the Celts surrounding them. Northeast of them in the Alps lived two groups of people. The Reti, maybe probably related to the Etruscans, so not Indo-European, and the Carni, who were also probably Eurasian origin, but both these people had, just like the Veneti, been heavily Celticized. And last but not least, we've mentioned them already, the one group of people in Europe that's more everywhere than the Greeks, the Celts. This area was so heavily settled by Celts, and even those who were not Celts had been completely influenced by them by the time of the Romans, that the Romans themselves called this area of northern Italy Gallia Cisalpina, which meant Gaul beyond the Alps. Obviously the other Gaul being modern-day France. And here you have it, a map of pre-Roman Italy. Now, you might be asking, what is this for? How is this useful when talking about why and how it is Italy divided now? This map is almost 3,000 years old. Okay, I hear you. So, how about this one? Anyone? See, this is a modern map. This map shows how Italy nowadays is divided in terms of languages or dialects. And now the magic. The one on the left is the one that we built until now piece by piece, the old one, which I put here as a sort of a roughly 400 BC. The one on the right is the last one I showed you before the magic trick, and it's the one that shows the languages of Italy. This is a language map of Italy as of today, 2020. Now, although many of these languages are not spoken on a daily basis anymore, the dialects that derive from them are spoken. So this map is accurate, whether we're talking about languages or dialects. Now, you don't need to be a genius to see where I'm getting at. As you can see, these two maps are quite identical, actually, except for little details, right? For example, the Latin is gone. Massive air quotes. Obviously, Sicilian languages are gone, as are Apulian languages, and as you can see in the top corners, those white and red striped areas, those are areas in which nowadays foreign countries' languages are spoken, specifically German and French. Little spoiler, the similarities are not casual. Let's pick the blue, for example, right, that we said was Greek. Now, all the language, which are nowadays called extreme southern Italian languages, spoken in the extreme south of the country, are still, to this day, massively influenced by Greek language, both in grammar and syntax. And in green, up in the north, we have the so-called, listen here, Gallo-Romance languages. So the influence of Gallic, so Celtic language here, is obvious and prevalent, especially in the phonetics. Now we'll get into the details of the language in the next videos, but what does a map like this tell you? Well, what it tells me is that 600 years roughly of Roman rule, unified rule, and little over 150 years of unified Italy didn't do much in terms of unifying the people that live in this peninsula. Italy's unique position as a bridge between the north and the south of Europe and the west and the east of Europe made it so that a number of radically different people lived in this peninsula for 1,000 plus years before the Romans and for 1,000 plus years after the Romans. And the maps we analyzed earlier are a sign that we can interpret, right, if we want. But to me, at least, are a sign of the fact that we are still roughly in the same place where our ancestors were, and that Italians have been quite consistent geographically, culturally, and linguistically. There's this one word in Italian, campanilismo, which I guess we could literally translate to bell towerism, like bell tower syndrome kind of thing. And it has nothing to do necessarily with the fact that the Italian landscape is dotted with bell towers, but the Italians themselves refer to Italy as the country of bell towers to basically express the concept of caring about one's own as opposed to what's public and shared. More specifically, most of the time, we're talking about one's own city, in some cases, one's own neighborhood, and 9 times out of 10, actually more like 10 times out of 10, the country that we have printed on our passport just matters very little. And these things have major social and political consequences. The country's plagued by corruption, the country's plagued by misuse of public funds on the politician's side, one of the highest tax evasion records in the world. It's hard to care about the rules when you don't care about the country that makes the rules. And talk about instability and the difficulty in having a unified front on the political side. Italy right now is sitting at a whooping 67 government in 65 years. Think about it. On average, an Italian government lasts little less than a year, if you consider that the mandate is supposed to be 5 years. Yup, not joking. Then there are the well-known differences between the north and the south of the country, roughly. I think it's a deep and complex issue that probably deserves a video of its own that I might do. But just a little taste of it, the differences are linguistical, cultural, historical, and yes, even ethnical. In conclusion, when we're talking about Italy, we're never talking about one Italy, but many Italies. Each and every one of them shaped by a different history, different people, different cultures. At least now we know what map was Metternich referring to when talking about Italy in 1847. This one, from 400 BC.